Your Aunt Sally creates a special soup that she discovers is the recipe for eternal youth. She would never age again as long as she eats her special soup daily. Of course, Aunt Sally wanted her friends to benefit from her recipe, and she began to share it with them. But because this was the time before computers, Aunt Sally doesn't trust them anyway, she only made handwritten copies of her recipe for her friends. But Aunt Sally had a silly little pug, and he liked to chew on things, and one day when Aunt Sally was out, the little dog found her recipe book and chewed and chewed and chewed. Aunt Sally began to panic. If she didn't have her special soup, she would start looking old again. She began to call her friends, who she had given her recipe to. Unfortunately, her closest friends had also lost their recipes. One lost in a move, another one lost in a fire, another one misplaced it and didn't know where it went. But thankfully, her friends shared the recipe with other friends, and these friends shared with other friends, who shared it with other friends. Aunt Sally began calling these friends of friends. Some had the recipe, some didn't, but soon enough, Aunt Sally was able to track down dozens of copies of her recipe. When she began to collect the recipes, though, she had a problem. Some recipes had one more ingredient than others. A few had missing ingredients compared to others. Now, what do you think Aunt Sally did? Aunt Sally was able to reconstruct her original recipe based on all the copies she collected. She knew that some copies had extra or missing ingredients because the vast majority of the other copies didn't have them. She also knew that everyone who received the recipe wanted to preserve them as accurately as possible. That means she knew the extra or missing ingredients were mistakes because these friends all had something to gain by having the right recipe.